Hello and good time zone, everybody. Welcome to Horde of Tales Creator Talks. Today with a special edition here over on YouTube, since the mere topic that we are going to discuss today seems to have put a curse on Twitch. My name is Markus, also known as the Individual, and I am joined today by Rich from Hatchling Games. Hatchling Games being the creators of games such as Inspirisles and Dowser, and currently very successfully kickstarting their new game, Cryptid Creeks. Rich, hello. Welcome to the stream.
Hi there. Pleased to be here. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, excited about everything at the moment.
Glad to hear it and glad to have you here. Rich, let's just dive right into it. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Hatchling Games, about how you got into tabletop RPGs and how you got into creating your own games as well?
Yeah, so I used to run, I think now it's about 3 years now, actually. So just before even thinking about producing Inspirisles, I used to run a group for teens in my local community, and they were called Hatchlings. So that's where it came from. So the name was born from this group. We used to play D&D 5e and a few other little indie games. And as we went through the years, played for a couple of years, and then the kids started saying, "Why don't you make something for yourself?" You were talking about writing, and you were sort of like gushing about these indie games. So why don't you try something yourself? And at the time, I was working for a deaf charity, so we learned sign language to level 3, and I used to really enjoy practicing sign with the community that I was worked with and my friends. And I thought, what would a combination of learning sign language and role playing look like? They've both got incredible benefits, and it turns out that's how Inspirisles was born. And the kind of rest is history, really. So I kickstarted that, and it did really well, much better than expected, and it gave us the sort of like funding to be able to produce all of our own material, especially the sign language stuff, and and then we basically carried on from there, and I built a community around Hatchlings sort of brand and community kind of engagement, and that's how it's happened, really. That's how I get to myself here.
That's how that proverbial ball got rolling and
Indeed.
kept making games. Inspirisles, of course, I have to say, I love how Inspirisles incorporates also sign language into the game. And it's great to have games that also teach us these kinds of elements through the means of play.
Yeah.
With your current project, Cryptid Creeks, it's interesting that you that got you here eventually, because it feels to me like Cryptid Creeks is very different from, let's say, a game like Inspirisles. Or is it that different?
Well, it's all ages again, so the age band is quite important. I think it's mainly based on my inspirations when I was younger, my sort of growing up. I used to grow up on a boatyard, actually, in Cornwall in the UK, and my parents were kind of renovating this dilapidated folk boat and trying to make it river worthy. So we spent like years on this boatyard, and I had such a good time during that period of life, kind of like with my brother and stuff, and we had such as sort of like expansive imagination about things, and it was just outdoors all the time. It felt really good. And so when I got to uni, I kind of had this idea for this novel. It's got similar themes, kind of like about the father going off to the Falklands and not coming, missing action or something. That's what it was about. And this kid kind of discovering these like nature spirits and stuff that are kind of that he had to do tasks for. And they said that they would return his father safely back home if he completed these tasks. So it's a bit darker than Cryptid Creeks even, but it's a bit more like Pan's Labyrinth kind of themes. But that's kind of how it's got me here. In terms of it differing from Inspirisles, yeah, I mean, Inspirisles is kind of education led. I think it's an educational game before it's a RPG. So it's got quite light RPG elements, but it's integrated within the sign language learning, which is the most important element of it. Whereas Cryptid Creeks is more of an expression of my of my nostalgic childhood.
Expression of nostalgic childhood, because it's interesting, the elements that you mentioned, your memories of fixing up a boat, your ideas for this story of a child going to look for a parent, encountering these nature spirits. It feels like conceptually those all kind of return in Cryptid Creeks, which asks the question, what is it exactly that Cryptid Creeks is about as a game?
Well, ostensibly it's about a curse. So you basically start the game and there's a mysterious and enigmatic character that visits the creek, which is kind of quaint little. It's kind of modelled off Northwest US, a bit like Gravity Falls kind of environment and setting. And this character visits the town as like a tourist with a briefcase, and in the briefcase they have an item which turns out to be like terrible cursed upon it. And this character called the peddler sells this item to a local, and the group of players, which play River Scouts, and you have to kind of locate the owner of this object and also destroy the item. That's kind of
Locate
the
the
principal idea. Yeah, so you have to kind of go around the community and you have to pick up clues, because at the beginning you have no idea who owns this item, or indeed what the curse is entirely, because it kind of starts off with a rumbling and kind of themes.
So there's that mystery that it already starts out of. Who is
Yeah,
this mysterious figure, and what does that item exactly do? What is it?
exactly.
What is its nature?
What's the nature of the curse as well? Yeah, so how is it affecting the setting, the people in the town, and the wider community?
And the player characters in this game, the ones who are going to investigate this curse, who are they? Who are these characters?
So you play River Scouts, and you're a local group of kids. You're kind of young adults, like on the cusp of adulthood, um, and you kind of adopt this clubhouse from the previous generation of scouts. So if you imagine like these generation of scouts all the way through history, so the last major ones were in 1960s, led by this character called Hilda, who's kind of central figure to the game. And previously, that group of scouts lifted the curse and destroyed the item. So you kind of take over the reins from the older generation of scouts that are retired or they've died, and you kind of you go into this clubhouse and you kind of have to like repair it and make it your own, and you'll get a boat as well, like a dinghy that you can kind of take out onto the river, and then you've got to you're sort of tasked with finding this item and removing the curse, and you're tasked for this sort of quest by a thing called a watcher, which is this giant animal nature spirit.
There's a few different things then going on already for the player characters. They're not just investigating a mystery caused by some strange item. They also, well, repair a clubhouse. They deal with like the experiences and things that the previous River Scouts might have already solved. Maybe there's even a curse coming back from the past from a previous generation that they have to
Exactly.
solve again.
Exactly.
And then there's also this watcher figure. And what kind of role does the watcher figure have in all of this?
Well, they're kind of essentially the quest giver at the beginning, but they kind of guide the players through the game. So that they're kind of like the head or the leader of these supernatural creatures called the Eries. Now, Eries are kind of like an amalgamation of all the supernatural elements of the creek. So they can take all different forms, but they're usually tied to the theme of the curse. So at the beginning, the navigator will kind of invent this watcher and these Eries to have a similar theme to what the curse is going to be. But that's where the navigator's kind of impact stops in some ways, because then the players take over with their roles and with what they investigate and with what they conceive to be the answer to clues.
That's an interesting segue you give there, because at that point, it's basically also the mechanics and the rules of the games that come into play. what exactly how exactly does all of this mechanically work? Because I do know that Cryptid Creeks does describe itself as a game carved from Brindlewood, and that is, of course, Bay, a
Hmm.
fantastic game that's also about investigating,
Yeah.
not by kids or teenagers in Brindlewood Bay, but elderly people who
Hmm.
solve mysteries in their little town. What inspired you about Brindlewood Bay to use similar mechanics to it, and how do those mechanics work in Cryptid Creeks?
Well, originally Cryptid Creeks was going to be powered by the Apocalypse system, so it's going to be quite traditionally like maybe more in towards Monster of the Week, and those kind of system mechanics. But I discovered Brindlewood Bay after backing it, and we got the PDF through, and I sort of like read through it, and a light bulb kind of went off. You know, it's one of those moments where you're like, this seems to fit so well with my themes and my kind of my intentions. I love the solving the mystery like organically. I absolutely love that kind of idea where it's like there's no set locations, there's no set suspects, there's no set items, there's no set kind of way of destroying the item. So it's like it's all dependent on your moves basically and your success of your
Right.
moves.
Right. And that it feels like such a like reverse way of how it's usually been in TTRPGs. Like I remember as my experience as a GM, like when I set up a mystery in one of my games, I'm like, okay, I know who it is. I know who's the culprit. I know what they used for it, and here's the 15 different clues I put in there. But there's no guarantee that your players are going to find those clues, or even better, there's a chance that the players are going to put together a way better theory of
Oh
what's
yeah,
going
for sure.
on that's way
Yeah.
more exciting than you have come up. And this sounds like a game like Brindlewood Bay and thus Cryptid Creek actually facilitates that through its mechanics.
Yeah, people talk a lot about like collaborative storytelling, but like with Cryptid Creeks, I think it's the first time I've discovered something that's truly like that. It feels like it's like the players and the navigator are working together to kind of form this narrative, and like you say, it can go anywhere it wants to go, and it also leaves a lot to like or spontaneous kind of interpretation. So like the navigator can just like twist around there or go around the corner or something, or like switch something up at any moment. It wouldn't affect the narrative at all as long as it sticks to the theme of the curse
Right.
and eventually trying to find this item. That's all right. You're not trying to railroad the players at all at any point, because essentially they can't be, because they're conceiving it themselves.
Yeah, there's no railroad to be railroaded on if you're
Exactly. There's no path.
if
There's no set path.
exactly. Exactly. That's that's fascinating, and I think very much indeed in the spirit of collaborative storytelling that we're seeing more and more these days. Talking about switching up systems, because as you mentioned, Cryptid Creek started out as a PBTA game powered by the
Mhm.
Apocalypse. Games like Monster of the Week use that, and then you found Brindlewood Bay, and you saw that its mechanics fit your game way better. To me, as someone who has never designed a tabletop RPG, I've played a lot, but I've never designed one. To me, that sounds like you've basically built a car and you decide to pull out the engine and put in a different engine at a point.
I love that.
How did that go for you? That's changing up
That's
the
brilliant.
systems.
That's exactly what it's like. It's just lift the bonnet up and rip it out. Yeah. Inspirisles is completely original system. So Inspirisles started as a 5e hack. But very, very quickly I realized there's no way that sign language elements could I could just shoehorn them in. So I had to
Mm,
have a full system that integrated it like seamlessly. So I had to do that an original system, which we now call the belief system. But that was a hell of a struggle. I don't think I'm a natural, certainly not mechanical designer. I think I'm quite a good narrative designer, but mechanically, I'm not very good at math. I'm not very good at like numbers, balance, things like this. So I have to hire other people now to kind of help me out, which is fine because everyone needs help with stuff. Um, but discovering system reference documents has been like an absolute revelation. Like Dragon Dowser uses the Carter system, which I think I'll ever do another. I'll never use a different system for journaling games because it's just so intuitive. It's so beautiful. It's so streamlined. Just having a spread of cards has so many potential for kind of like narrative theming and prompts. It's wonderful. So Cryptid Creeks, as soon as you get that right system, it just seems to sing to you, and it saves a lot of kind of anxiety and stuff about mechanics.
Right.
And also, it's also partly play tested already. You know, not fully, obviously, but like it's part way there at least. Even if you're hacking something.
Indeed. And what you mentioned there, once you find like just the right rules that vibe with the themes you're going for, I can imagine that certain things start falling into place easier. That you just
Mm,
also start seeing, oh, yes, this works. This is coming together.
yeah,
And I can have this game at a table and people will enjoy playing it.
yeah. I think it's interesting because people have different strengths. Designers have very, very different strengths. Like my strength's always been ideas, concepts, and kind of like themes. And I can tie them quite well to games and make quite original kind of ideas and kind of experiences. But
Mm,
other people obviously like lean more into the mechanics, which is great because they're the people that I to get on board, like come and help
mm,
me. Other people more aesthetic, like you could argue some games are like visually led. Um, and then there's so many different areas where I think it's a dominant kind of aspect of game design. Um, but like I said, if you've got this system, then I can just build themes upon it. So I can have things like, whereas Brindlewood has like the crowns, the kind of this idea of you put on a crown, and you can have different like explorations of your past, and this kind of dark thing happening underneath behind the scenes. I can do similar with the sort of setting I have with the scouts in the modern day, and the kind of like Creek setting and the young adult sort of kind of coming of age ideas.
And in that way, you're still giving your own twist to an already existing rule set. And I mean, that's basically also what an SRD, like a system reference document, is for. You're using this kind of rule
Yeah,
set and then adding your own thing to it, using it in your own way. As you also mentioned, as it's been done in Dragon Dowser with the Carta system, for example.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
I can
and
also
people.
imagine.
Yeah, sorry, Karen.
Oh, no worries. What did you want to say?
I just the designers generally love people hacking their systems. Obviously, it's a massive compliment, especially if they do it justice. And they create such a new experience. And we kind of want Cryptid Creeks to be like a gateway game for younger people and for
Right.
sort of families to play together. I was particularly aiming at like scouting groups, and like summer camps. That'd be really fun.
Sounds like it has the perfect setting for it. Like imagine you're at summer camp and
Oh yeah,
one of your camp leaders pulls out this game which is
yeah,
about kids of
absolutely.
your age that investigate spooky stuff during summer camp. I mean,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
wouldn't enjoy that?
yeah. I mean, it needs to happen, right?
It's beautiful. Talking about SRDs and hacking systems, I fully agree with your point of that game designers love getting their games hacked as well. I mean, just look at all kinds of game jams on itch, for example,
Oh
where there's
yeah,
games designers
right.
putting up their SRDs and they're basically saying, here's my ideas, go ham on these,
Yeah.
and we're going to see what comes out there. I think that's one of these beautiful things that we have currently also in the TTRPG community, not just collaborative storytelling at the table, but also
Hmm.
collaborative game designing and building upon each other's ideas to really widen the hobby and its content therein.
Hmm.
That also ever means that you probably did quite some hacking to the system that Brindlewood Bay used. And once you start hacking a system, you need to go play test it. You need to give it a good spin and see how it works at the table.
Yeah.
With Cryptid Creeks, what were for playtesting the game, what were like the most challenging things to playtest or rules, bits and bobs that you had to put through several iterations to get right?
It's always going to be the mechanics for me. So it's the moves really. It's getting the
Right.
moves balanced. And one of the biggest reactions that in these type of games, the card from Brindlewood games, is like they're called conditions in most of the game, where it's kind of like an affliction on the players, and it kind of restricts them, gives them disadvantages and rolls and things. In Cryptid Creeks, they're called misfortunes, but it's the same thing. Getting the balance right with those is very difficult, and we're still having to work on that because
Mm.
they kind of like infuse everything, from the badges, which are the special moves for the scouts, all the way to the basic moves that they share, and making sure that the navigator's reactions are balanced with the player possibilities of advancing and kind of solving the curse.
Right. Because that advancing as well, that happens for the players, if I understand it correctly, happens on several tracks in a way, that advancements. They have their own characters, the roles, the playbooks basically, that they can advance in. They have their clubhouse that they can fix up, and they have the boat that and then of course also they're unraveling that curse and that mystery step by step, which is also a sense of progress.
Yeah, so we're trying to beyond the ash can and the quick start, we're going to try to incorporate the boat mechanics more and more into it, because it's kind of central to the game, and it's very important to me that it's quite front and center. So we're going to try and bring a few more mechanics and kind of like intentional design around the boat, and make it kind of the the center point.
Right. We mentioned also the navigator a few times already in the conversation. One thing that I find interesting is, which is part of the whole collaborative storytelling theme, is that the navigator doesn't roll. The navigator itself isn't someone that picks up the dice and rolls things in this game, but you describe the navigator as being instead the biggest fan of the group, of the player characters. What do you mean exactly by the navigator slash game master facilitator being the biggest fan?
I think it's almost like they've picked up a book written by the players, and they're kind of like, or they're watching an animated series that the players have kind of produced and kind of animated. So it's kind of like there's almost like sitting back and just guiding them slightly, but the rest is done by them, and they're kind of just going along with it and enjoying the kind of like twists and turns that the players are creating through their own roles. So, for instance, if a player approaches like one of the persons in the town, a townsfolk, a member of the community, and they're acting shifty or something, and somehow they roll a 12 or something, which is like a really high success, then all the navigator has to do is really kind of like impact that narrative and bring the story to life, and kind of say, like, I know someone in an actual play was saying they were kind of like fidgeting in their pocket with something, and it's like,
right.
and they tried to make a swift exit from the cafe. It's kind of like, and the scouts kind of like, then, well, we're trying to follow them, or do we follow them, or do we talk to them later, or do we let them go? All these things. So it's emergent gameplay, and I think there's nothing more sort of like enjoyable for a facilitator than that.
Right, exactly. To really, as you mentioned, like watching your favorite characters in a TV show, but I do think that part of that is also watching them overcome challenges that come up in their ways. So would you say that even as a fan, the navigator still, of course, has to make sure that there's challenges to overcome for the characters?
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's one of their key principles. So we talked about misfortunes, and that's kind of one of the ways they can react. But the game's centrally got this thing called the curse clock, which is like a clock basically with 4 phases, and it's not representative of like a timeline. So it's not like morning, afternoon, evening, and night. It's more like escalation of the curse. So if it starts off with the first phase, it's kind of like the rumblings, kind of like rumors around town, certain small incidents. As you get to the second phase, it starts to escalate, and the third phase, it gets really bad, can become like really affecting the whole community, and even the further community, like the town of Stonewater to the north. And then the fourth phase, like the final phase, where the curse is like full on blown up, and kind of depending on what the themes are, it could be anything. It could be like, like the dead raised. It could be like lycanthropy, like werewolves. Could be like dolls come to life. I don't know, anything. Pirates, whatever.
That's the most creepy one. All your dolls coming to life, and then suddenly there's just this army
I don't think I'm going to play that, to be honest.
Yeah, this army of animated dolls ruling the world.
Yeah, I think as soon as I said that, I was like, no, actually, I don't want that as one.
And this curse clock, this is also an element that is completely visible to the players themselves. They do know at what phase the curse is at this point.
Well, we're discussing this now. So one fun thing that we're thinking of developing is the fact that the players will describe when it kind of spreads and escalates. So in other words, it will be player led when it kind of like goes to its next phase. So that they can feel like, oh, we're now having to pick the pace up, or we're now having to strive super hard to discover this item. So yeah, we're trying to bring more and more elements where the players kind of create the world and kind of create the narrative. Not to give the navigator no work at all,
Right.
but to make it feel like a very balanced kind of like playing arena.
And it doesn't sound like the navigator has no work left here. I do think
Oh
that
yeah,
if you're still busy being the fan of all the player characters at the table, there's still a lot that you will have to take care of. You
oh
still
for
want
sure.
to make sure that everyone's fun is facilitated at the table. You still want to make sure that the rules are clearly understood
Yeah.
and that you're all on the same page with everyone at the table to to get the story to where you would want it to go as a group.
Yeah, but we also kind of want the navigator to feel less. I don't want it to feel burdened at all by having to make a lot of narrative decisions and like steer it too much. We kind of want it to be like very much a group effort
Right.
and a creative, like I say, a creative hub almost.
Which makes it also, I I think, more accessible to pick up if this is your first game
Yeah,
facilitating.
for sure.
If I do think there's quite a few games where if you put into the role of game master or facilitator, they come with this entire chapter about how it is to run the game. And
Mhm.
there's all these expectations then raised of you that you at the table as the facilitator or game master, you know the rules, you come up with the story, you design the world on your own, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera.
Yeah,
With the
yeah.
way that you describe the navigator in here, I think there's a lot less load on the navigator as well, and more emphasis on creating the story together.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's still wonderful that they can kind of play the NPCs and then kind of like describe the locations, and they can kind of like bring the peddler into it, and it's like this demonic
Mhm.
character, and what are their motivations? You know, how is the watcher acting? Like, how are they involved in the sessions? Like, what are the Eries doing? Are they like chaotic nature spirits, or are they like benevolent? Or even are they like so chaotic they're kind of slightly opposing the players? You know, so many possibilities for like the navigator still, but it's mainly steering and a little bit of kind of or not steering, guiding is a better word,
Right.
more of a guide,
Yeah.
and then yeah, just filling in those narrative elements as they go. Yeah,
Still having enough of that that enough chances to slip into the roles of different characters and guiding everyone along on this narrative path that you come up with together.
yeah, I'm excited about that, especially like then coming up with the like, especially I don't know. There's something about Brindlewood Bay, the fact that it's like a pre-generated town.
Hmm.
And it's something about coming into the system and kind of putting your own stamp on those on that community, you know, and the little locations and the landmarks and kind of like the old diner or something, or the you know, the hotel, things like that, you know, and all the NPCs within those locations. I think there's something wonderful about that, and I think we want the same for Cryptid Creeks. We want Cryptid Creeks to have like this set location where players come in and the navigator comes in and it kind of creates this amazing, could be it's mostly it's probably going to be humorous most of the time, but we
Right.
want it to be quite light-hearted, you know, and kind of like have those kind of like Saturday morning cartoon vibes.
Which is good that you mentioned it because we're calling this game Cryptid Creeks, of course. And when we hear the word cryptid, we could think about a very dark and serious game about going into the woods and trying to find Bigfoot or something. But it is definitely more a lighthearted and cozy game, isn't it?
Yeah, it's deliberately cozy. I like its influences are like things like Hilda, things like Gravity Falls, things like Lumberjanes, and they're all quite kind of yeah, cozy kind of media, and also really creative and also super fun. So and humorous. All of them have a really good humor. So yeah, kind of based on those things, and we want to keep that vibe alive. throughout the process, and kind of have narrative kind of like prompts for the navigator to bring those things into it. Why not do this to make this hilarious, or why not do this to make this a bit spooky or supernatural? These things, kind of like prompts is a good word for it.
Yeah, yeah. It is prompts. It prompts you to think about what approach you want to take.
Yeah.
And not only is Cryptid Creeks a cozy and lighthearted game at the end, you also made sure that it is as accessible as possible, because for the game you have been working together with Chris Hopper, who also worked on, amongst others, Tal'Dorei Reborn, and on more recently on Tales of the Valiant, as a consultant for that. What exactly did you work together with Chris on to make Cryptid Creek as accessible as possible?
Well, we haven't started the accessibility process yet, but Chris worked with Scriv. So Scriv the Bard is our co-designer, and they had a really successful campaign last year with Bard RPG, and Chris Hopper is the accessibility consultant on that project. And so essentially Scriv brought Chris over to Cryptid Creeks, which I'm delighted about because I always wanted to work with him, and he's obviously got an amazing resume and experience. So when we get to that point where we're going to start to incorporate kind of like PDF considerations and like fonts, all these things in terms of like layout and the back end of production, then he will be in his element, I think, and he's really excited to work with us.
Amazing. I think this is also a very important and often underestimated element of any kind of product that you make, and taking these things into consideration to make sure that the audience that can enjoy these games are as big as possible and have as easy as possible access to it, will only bring more players, not just to a game like Cryptid Creeks, but hopefully into the hobby itself.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of want this to be a real benchmark for Hatchlings and for other, especially family-friendly designers and publishers, so they can look at this game and go, "Oh, well, this is really, really highly accessible. It's got a lot of consideration behind it and thought," and especially for Hatchlings going forward for other products ahead of us. I mean, for instance, I had very little experience. I mean, I obviously worked with the deaf community for a long time, so I had a lot to do with disability awareness and accessibility before, but it's a very different thing with publishing. So Inspirisles doesn't even have an index. so it's got so this is exactly what I mean. So it's like you learn from things and you kind of develop, and now everything we're hoping to go forward, we're having to be really like thoughtful and kind of considered.
Right. Yeah. Learning from things and just taking the things you learn with you into the next project. I think that's also the logical flow of going from one project to the other.
That's the only way to grow, really, and to just make your ideas more accessible. Yeah, exactly.
One thing where you probably also learned one thing from one project and then into the next was your experiences with running Kickstarters for games as well. Because Cryptid Creek is not the first Kickstarter that you're running for a product. It has been done with previous titles for Hatchling Games. Currently, Cryptid Creeks is, if I may say so, doing very well on your Kickstarter. It looks like it's running very well, and well deserved so. But putting out a project of any form on a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter, that is something that probably comes with its own challenges and its own things to pay attention to. What would you say is, in all the Kickstarters that you've been involved in, what is the most important lessons that you have picked up on when it comes to kickstarting or crowdfunding your project?
I think the biggest challenge I've found, and the thing I've learned most about it is I don't know how to express it properly, but it's kind of like feature creep, or kind of like it escalates beyond what you can deliver sometimes, and that's definitely the case with Inspirisles and Overisles, where it raised much more than I expected. Therefore, I wasn't prepared for it, and therefore, because I was inexperienced, I kind of just put more and more things onto the project, which what that does is it expands and it kind of elongates the kind of production timeline, and it puts pressure on fulfillment. And Hatchlings is just my wife and I still, and some
Yeah.
people believe that we're like almost like a corporation. I have no idea why, but it's like I think people think we're a much bigger team than we are. I mean, we hire a lot of people on projects, but it's just Kath and I at the base of it. So it makes it very difficult if you overpromise or you kind of put too many elements that are very difficult to produce and fulfill. So from Dragon Dowser onwards, and especially with Cryptid Creeks, we've kind of just like streamlined it so much. I'm so pleased. I mean, Cryptid Creeks has just got a set of dice, a printed map, very easy to do. The dice are handmade in the UK, so I can just send them off to wherever I want from here. And an anthology, which is going to be written by 10 of our friends in the community.
That's some easy, manageable stretch goals as well.
Very easy,
And ahead of time, these are the things we're aiming for, and you can already plan and budget for those as well.
Exactly. That's really, really difficult if you feel it's running away from you and you kind of keep adding things. Like in some ways, I wish people would just go, right, that's a finished stretch goal. I know it's not the end of the campaign, but we're finishing there. That's it.
Right. I think this is also the kind of story that you hear from a few crowdfunding projects that haven't been run well, where the success is kind of what eventually puts them in, and they put too much on their plate, which they can't fulfill. So you would say, like, really structure well what you want to achieve, what you're going to offer on stretch goals and the likes, and take those into account, and don't be overwhelmed by any, well, if you overshoot your target too much.
Yeah. Keep it so streamlined. It's all the way through it. It's like your rewards, your kind of the way the page is. Some of the most successful campaigns I've seen are very, very simple and very, very like clearly communicated. And they've just got a couple of pieces of art that's really visually kind of like identifying the project, but also quite vibrant and kind of appealing.
Right.
And there's a lot to Kickstarters. There's a hell of a lot to deconstruct about how to get it right. But ostensibly, it's kind of like a combination of the amount of pre-followers you have, your email list. That's essential. I mean, so many projects launch with no kind of like pre-backing or pre kind of marketing, and fall flat on their face. Really, this is a numbers game, isn't it? Really.
And so that's also something that would be good to take into account. Don't just launch your crowdfunding project. Make sure you have a lead up to it, a build up, and know that you have a good foundation of people that can get you started on there.
Yeah, I mean, I at least 6 months before I launch, I start marketing. I start some Facebook ads. I go to, self-promotion hashtags, all these things, just to build up a little bit of a following, at least as much as you need to get your goal.
Right.
And then launch.
Don't just start with nothing. Already have something that you can.
I mean, it's not a sort of thing you can take a chance on. It's not like it's very unlikely to. I mean, unless you're working with a massive publisher, in which case they do all that for you. You just go, right, I'll sign my kind of concept over to you, and then you just get all your tens of thousands of email followers.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we can't all be large publishing houses that have that kind of resources for it. With now with the Kickstarter currently running for Cryptid Creeks, how did you feel in like the lead up to the actual launch of it, which was at the start of this week? It launched on 5 September. We're having this conversation currently on 7 September. And how was it in the lead up to it? How did you feel? How did it go?
I loved it. I loved the lead up to this one. The others have been really stressful. I really enjoy making Kickstarter pages. Like it's strange because I know the way constructed now. I got quite of a joy about doing little visual elements, kind of like design, the way it's written, the way the rewards work. I quite enjoy putting them together. It's a big process, a long process.
Right.
It takes a while, but I do enjoy that element of it. But the lead up, I could feel the amount of enthusiasm from the community about it. I'm really confident. I was really confident in the themes and kind of the visual elements and the images we put out already, and kind of some of the ideas really well accepted. I really people took it, like a big hug. So it's kind of like, this is going to do fairly well. It's going better than expected, obviously, because it funded in a couple of hours, which is wonderful. And now the rest is just keep plugging away at kind of keeping it chugging on, and for the rest of the month.
Amazing. It must feel great to see something that you've been building up to for a while also just going past the goals so quickly. That must feel great.
It just takes a lot of pressure off. It's nothing worse than sitting there and looking at the Kickstarter, looking at the money, and like, is it going up? Is people backed out? So a lot of people cancel their pledges, which is maybe not a lot of people are aware of. But when you're in that month, the money can drop off, and it's not always like adding pledges. So because another project can launch at the same time, they want more, or anything can happen. The paycheck might have been delayed or anything, so they basically cancel it. And also, if a project isn't funded quickly, then people are less likely to back it because they don't know if it'll ever be successful. So
indeed, but
loads of factors.
That's a good point you mentioned as well, because like you can say like, okay, you've reached all your goals in like the first 2 or 3 days of the month, but until the campaign is completed, there is always that risk that people cancel their pledges, pull out, and there's actually less than you've expected.
Yeah, and then you've got the fees, and then you've got other things like this that you have to account for.
Always, yeah.
And again, if it's your first Kickstarter, it can be quite scary. There's that. I would suggest doing a smaller project, or possibly using a different platform. Like Crowdfunder is like a really good like mid-range platform, and they're really super supportive of creators on there. And a lot of people have had fairly reasonable successes in getting their goals met. And they do some good, like themed months and things, like around family-friendly experiences, or like Zine Quest, things like this.
Right. All right. Those are some really useful tips to also take into account. So anyone who's watching this and considering crowdfunding something, hope this is useful to you. Rich, we're slowly coming to the end of our conversation for today, but I always like to ask people before they leave here, I like to ask them a little bit of a silly question. And it kind of always depends on who I'm talking to. And Rich, I think with a game called Cryptid Creeks, I can ask you a question about cryptids. I have a feeling that you know about them, that you have knowledge about them. And I wonder if there was any kind of cryptid that could become your roommate. Which cryptid would you like to have hang around in your house?
If I had a pool outside, I would definitely want the Loch Ness Monster.
You would want to have Nessie in your pool?
100%. Like, I love all the media around Nessie and all those film attempts and cartoons, and even the books. Yeah, so I think that would be amazing. That would be amazing. If I knew it was guaranteed that I could have that as a companion, then I'd probably move to Scotland.
So while all the media is looking in all of the lakes in Scotland, you would just have Nessie over in your pool,
Yeah.
sunglasses on and everything, and just chilling in your home.
Yeah.
Excellent choice. That looks amazing. So in case any kind of cryptid hunters are watching this, you know where to look.
Hold my hands up.
All righty. Rich, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on here, telling us about your games, telling us about the projects. I mean, we've mentioned the Kickstarter a few times now. Cryptid Creeks is still currently kickstarting, and people can still back it until the end of the month. So you should definitely
got plenty of time.
Yeah, there's plenty of time at this point, but definitely check out that Kickstarter, and just also check out Hatchling Games on the socials. We're going to share the links in the video below as well. And treat yourself to a cozy, lighthearted, and somewhat spooky adventure in Cryptid Creeks.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here, Rich.
Thank you for having me on. It's really a real pleasure talking.
And if you feel like even more Cryptid Creeks while you're already here on the YouTubes, you can right now also go over to the channel of our friend Tavernaut, where there's currently the second session in play of their Cryptid Creeks adventure that they're playing over there. So if you hadn't had enough about spooky adventures, mysteries, watchers, and chaotic eerie's, you can head over there. Thanks everyone for dropping by. Thanks for people watching this later in the VODs. If you want to check out any other content that we have here, you can check out on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Horde of Tales, any VODs of our games and past creator talks that we had out here. And you should definitely also give us a follow on our socials, where you can always find when we're going live with new shows, conversations, and other things on our Twitch usually, and if Twitch is cursed by the powers of the cryptids, here over on YouTube. Thank you, everyone. Take care, stay safe, and see you soon on Horde of Tales. Bye.
Bye-bye.